I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE, a global center of excellence for geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Learn how you can put geopolitics to work for your organization at ranenetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to RANE's Essential Geopolitics podcast. Despite initial optimism, South Africa's first coalition since the end of apartheid has made little progress in advancing economic reforms. Just as the government progressed to the final stage of the budgetary process in early July, serious allegations targeting the police minister have laid the ground for a new corruption scandal that threatens to destabilize the government. RANE's Sub-Saharan Africa analyst Rémi Dodd is here to dive into the implications of these developments with me. Hi Rémi, welcome back.
Hi Ma, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So what exactly is this latest corruption scandal about, and what does it mean for President Ramaphosa?
Yes, sure. So regarding the latest corruption scandal, it came out in early July, and we had some pretty explosive accusations being made by the police commissioner of the KwaZulu-Natal province, General Mkhwanazi. Now, there was multiple allegations being made. I can't name all of them, but there's two main accusations to keep in mind. The first allegation is that Senzo Mchunu, the police minister, has been interfering in the work of the political killings task team of the South African Police Service in KwaZulu-Natal, most notably by disbanding it. And General Mkhwanazi alleges that the reason for the political killings task team being disbanded is that it was making progress in unveiling some links between a criminal syndicate involved in drug trafficking with members of parliament, members of the judiciary, and even members of the South African Police Service. So this is a first major allegation put forward by General Mkhwanazi. The second allegation, which also matters here, is that according to General Mkhwanazi, Senzo Mchunu himself, so the police minister, has links to criminals and has been receiving some financial support by these criminals in exchange for interfering in the work of the police. So no surprise here, these allegations have been a bombshell. They've been at the center of the political conversation in South Africa since early July. And in response to these allegations, we've had President Ramaphosa suspend Mchunu from his position of police minister and also announce the start of a commission of inquiry. Now, this response has been considered as relatively weak by a fair amount of people in South Africa, but we do now have terms of reference which have been put forward regarding this commission of inquiry. And we know that a first interim report should be put forward within 3 months, i.e. in October 2025, with other reports to follow suit. So thinking about the implications of this scandal for Ramaphosa, this scandal really has the potential of being a major headache for him, given that Senzo Mchunu was a very close and is a very close ally of Ramaphosa to this day. And the fact that this scandal potentially, if it is to be confirmed, happened under Ramaphosa's watch breaks the narrative that Ramaphosa has been seeking to put forward since he came to power in 2018, that he would be tackling corruption in South Africa. So potentially a very serious challenge for the president.
And what does the scandal mean for South Africa's coalition government?
Yes, so thinking about the implication for the coalition governments, I do think a bit of context here could be helpful for listeners. But the scandal is coming at a time when South Africa is already facing some rapid change in terms of its domestic politics. Because over the last 30 years or so, we had relative continuity. We had the African National Congress, which had a parliamentary majority from the elections of 1994 all the way until last year. Now, last year, the ANC lost its parliamentary majority and it was forced into forming a coalition government, which is known as the Government of National Unity, the GNU, which has around 10 parties or so, but really comes down to being a partnership between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, which is a center-right party. Now, initially, there was a fair amount of optimism as you mentioned, Emma, about the prospects for this coalition government to advance some economic reforms. But what we have seen, especially since the start of 2025, is major internal struggles within the coalition between the ANC and the DA. And thinking about the budgetary process, for example, we were very close to having the DA being forced out of the coalition government back in April. So thinking about how this Senzo Nkono scandal could potentially affect the coalition government, I would argue here that the DA is likely to take a more confrontational stance against the ANC as it tries to distance itself from the scandal. So in practice, this means we should be expecting more episodes of tension between the ANC and the DA in the coming year, and that is going to test the cohesion of this coalition government.
What is your outlook for the cohesion of the coalition government given all of this information?
Yeah, so I would say on that front that in the next 3 to 6 months, a collapse of the coalition government, or should I say the DA's exit or removal from the government, it's possible, but it's unlikely. There's multiple reasons for this. The first one is that despite being increasingly perceived as unpopular, the government still enjoys relative support from the public, and this matters both for the ANC but also for the DA. And it means that neither Ramaphosa nor the DA have a strong interest as of right now in bringing this partnership to an end. The other reason is that if we were to have a collapse of the coalition government, it would likely have a negative impact on the South African economy, and we could see support for the ANC and the DA potentially decline. So this would be the outlook for the second half of 2025. Now, as we move into 2026, however, I would argue that this risk is going to be growing, and there's several reasons for this. The first one is, as we discussed, the allegations put forward by General Mkhwanazi risk destabilizing this government, but there's other factors which do increase the risk of a collapse of the coalition between the ANC and the DA. The first one is that we are going to be moving into the run-up of the next municipal elections, which are scheduled either at the end of 2026 or the start of 2027, and we should be expecting the Democratic Alliance to take a more confrontational stance against the ANC in the run-up to these elections, as it tries to showcase that it is holding the ANC accountable and also securing some policy concessions. So potentially having the DA acting in a more obstructionist way in Parliament, and this is really going to drive tensions between the ANC and the DA, and also increase anti-DA sentiment within the ANC. Now, this anti-DA sentiment is quite strong within the party. We have plenty of cadres within the ANC who are unhappy with the current partnership with the DA. And we could reach a point at some time next year where the National Executive Committee of the ANC, which is the highest organ in the party, basically decides to force Ramaphosa's hand into sacking DA ministers from cabinet, and this would most likely bring to an end the partnership between the ANC and the DA.
Can you talk a bit about what this political uncertainty could mean for the economy?
Sure. So the constant spats we have between the ANC and the DA, and the fact that these could actually be getting worse, is just not good news for the economy. It is undermining business confidence, given that we have this lingering risk of a collapse of the coalition government. Now, you add to this the fact that there's still a fair amount of red tape in South Africa, and we end up in a situation where many international businesses are not very keen at the idea of investing in the country. Now, these intra-coalition tensions also are likely to slow the pace of economic reforms. And this is a problem for South Africa, because the country really is in need of major economic reforms in a number of sectors, but especially, I would argue, in the power sector and in the transport sector. Now, thinking about the power sector, I think a lot of us remember the massive rolling blackouts there were in South Africa in 2022 and in 2023. Now, we've had actually some significant improvements on that front, thinking about the reliability of the power sector, but the cost of electricity actually remains high, and this is a hindrance for many businesses. Now, regarding the transport sector, We've seen in the early 2020s a decline in rail freight. Now, the situation has somewhat stabilized, but there's still some pretty significant bottlenecks from a logistical standpoint, and this is a problem for exporters. Now, thinking about the coalition government, we are still expecting some timid reforms as long as it remains in place. There are some planned reforms in the mining sector. Same thing, thinking about freight. There are some reforms actually being put forward as of right now to try and lay the ground for private sector companies to operate on South African railways. But my expectation here is that these reforms are going to be slow as a consequence of the intra-coalition tensions, and also probably as a consequence of this, insufficient to attract investments at scale in the next couple of years. So most likely we end up in a situation where economic growth in South Africa remains relatively low, even though we could still see some improvements compared to 2023 and 2024.
How do you see South African politics evolving in the medium term, I guess, based on your analysis of these events?
Yes, so I would say that with economic growth remaining low, we should be expecting living standards for most South Africans to not increase in any significant way and potentially even decline in some cases. And I would argue that this is going to fuel the ongoing erosion of the ANC's support base. Now, for context, back in the early 2010s, the ANC received around 60% plus of votes, and this has declined down to 40% of votes in the elections last year. Now, given the trends I have just discussed, thinking about the economy, I would not be surprised to see the support for the ANC decline to the mid-30s, if not 30%, in the next municipal elections. On the contrary, it seems that the DA is not suffering from its participation in government, with polling showing it is now in the mid to high 20s, up from around 21-22% in the 2024 general elections. So we should probably expect the ANC to perceive its electoral results in the next municipal elections as a setback. And I would argue that this is going to be shaping the run-up for the ANC's next national conference, which is scheduled in December 2027. Now, the reason we care about this national conference is because this is where the ANC elects its new party leadership. And I would argue that with the perception among party cadres of a defeat in the 2026 or 2027 municipal elections, we are going to have the anti-DA elements within the ANC seizing upon this opportunity to argue that the partnership with the Democratic Alliance is not working for the ANC. And given this context, it seems to me more likely that we have candidates taking over the party leadership, which is not quite as amenable to working with the Democratic Alliance when compared to Cyril Ramaphosa. So I do think on that front that the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, stands as having a strong position for this party leadership, and he is more skeptical of the partnership with the DA, even though there also are some other prospective candidates, like, for example, the Secretary General of the ANC. But as of right now, I would argue Mashatile has the strongest position. And if we are in a situation where Mashatile or someone else on the left of the party takes over the party leadership, there is going to be a question about the future of the partnership between the ANC and the DA, which could very quickly crumble. But also, there would be an open question regarding Ramaphosa's ability to finish his second term. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that we have precedents of ANC presidents not going to the end of their second terms following the national conference which occurred over the course of their second term. This happened, for example, with Jacob Zuma, who resigned early in 2018. There was a number of corruption scandals which made matters worse for him, but it was also the case in the 2000s when President Thabo Mbeki was also compelled into resigning early.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Rémi, and for sharing these insights. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or are you ready to wrap up?
Actually, my pleasure.
Well, it's been great speaking with you. You can read Rémi's analyses on this topic on our platform at the link in the description. And to learn more about our products and services, visit our website, ranenetwork.com, which is RANE network.com. Thanks for joining us.